This stream is going to be very heavy on data and very light on theory. And I just want everybody to understand that that's not because the theories that are floating around everywhere here are poor or not true. I just want to stick to facts and data and things that we absolutely know. So everybody is going to be talking about, software programs and, things that are being alleged right now. And I'm not saying that those things are not valid and don't need to be looked into. But what I'm going to do is stick to what we are absolutely documentedly positive about to give you guys an idea of where we stand right now. So there are several states where there are absolutely massive irregularities. Okay? We've got Nevada, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina, which we haven't heard very much about at all, and Pennsylvania. The margins in these states are razor thin. Michigan itself is an outlier in that the margins are not as thin as they were. But you'll understand in a few minutes after we go through some stuff what's going on there. Now, that's not to say that there aren't other states that are having issues here. California, massive reports coming in from people of issues. Virginia, massive irregularities being found and stuff like that. So there's a lot of other stuff going on here, but I'm focusing on those 5 or 6 states right now, just to give you an idea of the ground game and what's being done there. In every single state that we're going to talk about today, there have been people who have come forward, put their names out there, signed affidavits of what they've seen. And at this point in time, I think the state with the most shenanigans is Pennsylvania. And that's why you will have noticed a week ago or so, not even now, 5 days ago, the entire team flocked to Pennsylvania. So there's almost like a campaign headquarters in Pennsylvania. And there's a lot going on there, and we're going to get to Pennsylvania. So let's start with Michigan. Michigan GOP chairwoman says software glitch tallied thousands of Republican votes as Democrat. And this one has been floating around out there. Super, super, super important, okay? The software being used to tally in Michigan was rejected in Texas. 47 counties in Michigan use the same software in the same capacity. It's more than half of Michigan's 83 counties. The way that they caught this was that there was an irregularity because this county is typically ridiculously very strongly Republican. After this was looked into by cross-referencing paper ballots with what was happening in the machine, that's how it was discovered. So now, supposedly, there is a review going on in Michigan of all of these counties that voted using this software that's running this machine. Now, this process of this electronic voting machine stuff is not as simple as it sounds. Understand that these machines are not supposed to be connected to the internet at all. The data transfer takes place physically, which is why a few of the things that I'm going to show you today with anomalies going on with physical drives and things like that are super important, as well as things that are being brushed off to the side as not important that should take on some statistical importance, such as, tens of thousands of registered voters, newly registered, who didn't vote, and why that's important. Like this. Michigan officials, this is from October 30th. Understand, I'm going to explain this very much. Michigan officials investigating voter registration irregularities. State officials are investigating what they call irregularities in voter registration forms in Muskegon, but have provided few other details. The city clerk reported the problems to the Board of Elections, which forwarded the issue to Attorney General Dana Nessel and the police. There were reported irregularities in voter registration forms, both mailed and dropped off in person in quantity, late September and early October. None of the irregular voter registrations resulted in voters receiving absentee ballots. Any resulting registrations have been voided, and there is no expected impact on any election. Now, I am working with a bunch of really fine folks. I don't know if they want me to say who they are, so I'm not going to. But what we're doing is we're getting all these voter registration files in all these states, and the data dig has been ongoing. This is a problem. Why? Because if you have more registered voters, when you are padding, if you allegedly pad the vote, the precinct percentage voting does not look as high. Understand what I mean? You can't have 90% of a precinct voting if you've padded the voter registration roll with registrations for 50,000 more people. Even if they don't vote, it's a cover. It's a cover. So we've got that. And then we've got this allegation here from Breitbart in Michigan. Detroit ballot tabulators entered names of non-voters during count. This is something that has been reported. People are putting their names and faces to this stuff. It will, these are going to be in court cases. 2 observers who were at the TCF Center in Detroit during the absentee ballot counting process have produced affidavits claiming they witnessed workers create new voter files with information obtained from ballots. The main list of persons who had registered to vote on or before November 1st was in an electronic poll book. The supplemental sheets were the lists of persons who had registered to vote on November 2nd or November 3rd. None of the names on the new ballots were on the supplemental sheets or the electronic voter form, and the computer operators at several counting boards were manually adding the names and addresses of these thousands of ballots to the system. When I asked what the possible justification was, I was told that the office had checked them out. I challenged not one ballot, but the entire process, as the names were not in the poll books or the supplemental sheets, and because the DOBs were all wrong, the date of births were all wrong, all being marked as 1/1/1900. Every ballot was being fraudulently and manually entered into the electronic poll book as having being born on January 1st, 1900. The last batch of ballots was processed in the 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. time frame. Apparently, more than one person witnessed this, and they're putting their face and their name and signing court affidavits that can hold up in court. I hate when this happens. Don't want those notifications. So what does this mean? This would explain one of the reasons why they did not want people watching the polls in Detroit. This has been an issue across the country in certain contested areas like Detroit, like Philly, like Pittsburgh, where it is the law that both parties must. This is not a question. This is not one of those, we're going to make it up as we go. No, this is law. There must be observers from both political parties observing all vote counts. There is no getting around that. These ridiculous people that in Detroit started putting up cardboard over windows are going to be in trouble. Okay? These people in Philadelphia that we were learning about through all these press conferences that have been going on lately, who were keeping people 30, 40, 50 feet away, moving tables, etc., are going to be in trouble. This is no laughing matter, and as in Pennsylvania, it's at the Supreme Court. So we'll keep going. That's just one thing that's happening in Michigan for people who were in there able to look. Earlier this week, Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson denounced the lawsuit filed by President Trump's campaign as frivolous, designed to spread misinformation and sow seeds of doubt among our voters about the integrity of our elections process. Poll workers had been following every rule meticulously. Okay, that's not what one Republican observer says she saw at the Detroit Convention Center on Wednesday, where she volunteered. She experienced being blocked from counting tables, expelled, harassed, prevented from doing the job of ensuring ballots are completed fairly. The election workers were not letting anyone in. The election hall was full, so they waited. Eventually, they managed to get in by tagging along with a large group of union members who were being admitted to the hall where ballots were being counted, despite previous claims that the hall had been full. They signed in, gave their names, their affiliation, and then they were harassed. And if they touched their face or their mask, they were booted. This is not going to, I'm telling you, you guys can doubt the process all you want. I know a lot of people are like, we'll never get anywhere. The courts are corrupt, blah, 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 blah. You can discount the process all you want. This is just not legal. And from the research that I've been able to do, there is a chance that those ballots can be anything that was counted without being, the opportunity is on the table, as per Rudy Giuliani yesterday, for them to be thrown out. All of them. Now, it's such an overwhelming mess to sort through because in all of the states we're going to talk about today, there's overwhelming evidence of potential fraud. This stuff is not normal, despite what anybody wants to tell you. Here, Michigan. Here's a list of 10,000 people that are confirmed deceased that requested and returned absentee ballots in Wayne County. It doesn't mean they all voted. It means their absentee ballots were returned. I wonder what's going to be in those absentee ballots. And here's the list. Total probably deceased voters returning absentee ballots in the election, 11,305. Total confirmed deceased per Social Security Death Index, 9,948. Now, everybody has to understand. Everybody keeps saying, oh, we don't have any widespread fraud. You don't need widespread fraud. One county in Michigan, that computer glitch, in quotes, we were talking about, flipped it. You don't need widespread voter fraud. Outside of the facts and data that we're talking about today, there is a psychological operation going on here, the likes of which we've never experienced in this country. Let's listen to the Michigan GOP chair giving the update the other day about what happened in that county.
If all this wasn't enough, in Antrim County, ballots were counted for Democrats that were meant for Republicans, causing a 6,000 vote swing against our candidates. The county clerk came forward and said tabulating software glitched and caused a miscalculation of the votes. Since then, we have now discovered that 47 counties use this same software in the same capacity. Antrim County had to hand count all of the ballots. And these counties that use this software need to closely examine their results for similar discrepancies. The people of Michigan deserve a transparent and open process.
Michigan. Let's go to Wisconsin real quick. This one really takes the cake. A flash drive that contained crucial absentee voter information on the 2020 presidential election was briefly lost during the early morning hours of Wednesday, November 4th, as the world waited for Milwaukee to reveal its ballot counts. Sources within Milwaukee County law enforcement told Wisconsin Right Now exclusively that the executive director of the Milwaukee Election Commission, Claire Woodall-Vaugh, realized she had lost the flash drive when she left with police escort. Those results would prove to be heavily weighted towards Joe Biden in the critical battleground state. Biden would go on to, quote, win the state with the slimmest of margins, although President Donald Trump's campaign says he will request a recount. We reached out to the police department, the Office of Public Relations. They referred them around, the FBI, et cetera, et cetera. They reached out to Vaugh on Friday. We're told she was working. They didn't return any, calls or anything like that. Calls and emails for comment to the mayor went unanswered. She became panic-stricken when she realized she had lost one of the several flash drives. An unidentified female later handed her the flash drive, stating something to the effect of that it was what she needed. It's not clear how long it was missing, but the situation has caused a stir within the police department and ignited a wall of stonewalling. People are worried about their jobs. But here's the tweet of her en route to the county election officials. This is what happens typically because these machines are not supposed to be online. They are physically transported over. This woman is carrying a flash drive that was handed to her by some random staffer. And handing it over a chain of custody is completely lost. Not all of these things are going to make it into court cases, folks. Not all of these things are going to be adjudicated. Not all of these things are going to be looked into. It's just not going to happen. But I'm going to explain them to you anyway because some of them may. Wisconsin clerks may have unlawfully altered thousands of absentee ballots. County and municipal clerks and poll workers across Wisconsin may have unlawfully altered witness statements on thousands of mail-in ballots across the state. Wisconsin Statute 6.86 provides that an absentee ballot must be signed by a witness who's also required to list their address. Multiple sources tell the Dan O'Donnell Show that municipal clerks and vote counters across the state filled out witness signatures themselves. Acting on false and unlawful advice from the Wisconsin Elections Commission, these clerks may have inadvertently invalidated thousands of absentee votes. The statute is very, very clear. This is Supreme Court Justice, retired, Michael Gableman. Worked as a poll watcher in Milwaukee on Election Day. If an absentee ballot does not have a witness address on it, it is not valid. The WEC sent uniform instructions to voters with their mail-in ballots that inform them that your witness must sign and provide their full address in the certification of witness section and warned that if any of the required information is missing, your ballot will not be counted. However, on October 19th, the WEC sent instructions to clerks that they can simply fill in the witness address themselves so that the ballot would not be invalidated. And here it is. Illegal. You can't do that. Just to stop really quickly, it's very important that everyone understand this. In all of these lawsuits across all of these states, the Democrats that brought the lawsuits attempted to change election law via judicial ruling. It is not the way it works. Judicial election law must be changed by state legislation, not judicial enforcement, which is why we have this legal brouhaha, by the way, going on in Pennsylvania on several different fronts, which we're going to get to probably, I think next I've got Pennsylvania up here. So you can't just have election people or election officials sending out wanton random guidance right before an election that flies in the face of election law. First of all, it disenfranchises voters, which is something they're supposed to care about very much. Second of all, it's illegal. It's illegal. So there's that. In defiance of and direct contradiction to statute, the Wisconsin Elections Commission gave guidance, that is cover, to all 72 county clerks and turned the statute on its head. They said, gee, we know the law says an absentee ballot without the witness address is not valid, but county clerk, you have a duty to go ahead and look it up on your own if there's no address. Do you guys understand where the problem may come in? So now, lawsuit needs to be filed about this. They have to have hard evidence of this, which means that all of these attorneys need to start subpoenaing for discovery. These lawsuits, for the most part, tomorrow, guys, and through this week is going to be an absolutely ridiculously busy day because week and month. It's going to be crazy because I'm going to be reading through all of these lawsuits. We're going to go through SharpieGate in Arizona today. I'm going to show you that one. Really, really, really interesting lawsuit. And we're going to go through them all. We're going to need to understand what they all say. You cannot bring a lawsuit that is not ironclad with facts and data behind it. In this case, it needs to be solid. Now, one thing that makes lawsuits very, very, very solid is witness affidavits and witness statements. Every time you have a lawsuit with several witnesses that are swearing under penalty of perjury and jail time that what they're saying is true, it makes that lawsuit very credible. You can't just ignore what 50 people, 80 people, 100 people are saying when they're swearing to it. That's great. Great evidence. Former Vice President President Trump's campaign is investigating the scale to which the clerks and election workers were altering ballots, as well as several other incidents it has termed irregularities. They have also called for a recount. Now, a recount is not enough. They need an audit. Recounts are great, but if they're counting fraudulent ballots, then it doesn't matter, especially not when in counties and precincts and wards where election workers were not allowed to come in and observe the process. The Biden campaign should be ecstatic for this. If Joe Biden won by the margin that he won by, in quotes, they should want it to be confirmed. There should be none of this hiding around in secret, but they are. They are. There needs to be a forensic audit on these ballots in all these places. That's the only way any confidence is going to be brought back to this process for anybody, whether you're a Biden voter or a Trump voter. Here, Clark County, Nevada. Ready? I think this is right here. Hold on.
Correct their ballots. So we got one lawsuit on that front. In just the last hour in Nevada, an election worker whose job was to process mail-in ballots says he witnessed irregularities in counting those ballots and was told by a supervisor whom he names to put through ballots he believed needed signature verification without that verification first being done. He says he was also told to ignore discrepancies with addresses. That worker has sworn out an affidavit which has been sent to the Department of Justice here in Washington. A Trump campaign attorney says of that, quote, the affidavit makes clear that we're not dealing with oversights or sloppiness. This was intentional criminal conduct. Correct their ballots. So we got one lawsuit on that front.
That's one. That's one, but there's a lot more here. So in Nevada right now, what's going on is for some reason, the links that I had pulled for Nevada are not up here. But basically what's going on in Nevada outside of that, they're up against a juggernaut in Nevada, just to let everybody know, in terms of the government there and the judges. They're basically just tossing that aside. So, they're tossing everything aside, but there have been over 3,000 criminal referrals made for people who voted illegally in Nevada against the rules. There are reports of people getting 6 and 7 mail-in ballots in Nevada because at the very last second, they changed the law and they just mailed out ballots in a wanton manner. So people were just receiving them. I have to be very clear. There is this sort of quote, fraud going on all the time in every election, but we've never seen it like this. I mean, this is just completely over the top. It is rampant. The allegations are rampant, and they all need to be investigated. Let's move to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is something. There's a bunch of lawsuits going on and a bunch of stuff going on in Pennsylvania. This is what I'm looking for. This explains this letter written by the Speaker of the House in Pennsylvania to Tom Wolf, the governor, is interesting. And I'm going to read it for everybody because it's important. And it goes through everything here. Now, everybody was saying when I tweeted this out yesterday, well, the governor doesn't have to listen to this, blah, 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 blah. And they're hedging right now on this. There are quotes. There are very few people responding to comment. There are very few people who are answering the question when asked from Pennsylvania in that leadership office what they're going to do. But Pennsylvania knows they're in deep doo-doo. They are in deep doo-doo right now. Okay, several issues, multifaceted in Pennsylvania. Dear Governor, as you're aware, the general election currently being conducted in the Commonwealth has generated a significant amount of interest among our citizens who have been anxiously awaiting results since the election concluded at the lawfully enacted deadline of November 3rd, 2020 at 8 p.m. For months, I, along with many members of the House of Representatives and Senate, the only people that matter, and we'll get to that in a second, have raised serious concerns relating to the administration of the election, specifically because this was the first full year Pennsylvanians would be able to use no excuse absentee mail-in ballots. Unfortunately, some of the concerns that were previously raised have manifested into issues which can't be overlooked. First, listen closely, guys, very important. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court unconstitutionally extended the deadline to receive late ballots and openly ignored the findings of fact and law that were issued by the Commonwealth Court. That issue is now being litigated at the United States Supreme Court. What they did, the Commonwealth came up with deadlines for when these ballots could be received. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania decided that the legislature's rules didn't matter and overruled the legislature. Completely unconstitutional, not allowed. It caused havoc because nobody listened to the legislation and the law, and everybody did their own thing. That case is at the Supreme Court right now. We're going to get into that in a second. I know this is going to be a little long, guys, today, but I really want to explain all this stuff so that it's out there as of timestamp 11/8/2020 so people understand what's going on. For months, I said that already. Okay. This issue is now being litigated at the United States Supreme Court. However, this judicial intervention created unnecessary chaos and uncertainty as to what constitutes a timely and lawfully cast vote. Second, your Secretary of State initiated another legal action in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to, quote, clarify whether signatures on returned absentee and mail-in ballots could be reviewed for authenticity by counties during the pre-canvassing of ballots. Without permitting the House or Senate to intervene and defend existing law, the court unilaterally directed the county boards of elections to not reject absentee or mail-in ballots for counting, computing, and tallying based on signature comparisons conducted by county election officials or employees, or as the result of third-party challenges based on such comparisons. What does that mean? It means they're just supposed to accept every damn thing, no matter what anybody says, and they weren't allowed to watch anyway, and count all of them as valid ballots, which is why you're seeing the proportion of rejected mail-in ballots this year and absentee ballots this year in Pennsylvania is a small, teeny, tiny little fraction of what it typically is in a normal year. This, of course, says Speaker, is a significant departure from Pennsylvania law and practice as it eliminated one of the most important security and anti-fraud features used with absentee and mail-in ballots. And it also treats voters who vote on Election Day in person differently from those that use the absentee ballot or mail-in program. Disenfranchises voters, i.e., if you vote in person, you have a more stringent requirement than you do should you have voted by mail or absentee. I.e., they check your signature against your license when you vote in person, and they don't give a crap if you put your signature on anything when you vote absentee. Completely illegal, which is why the Supreme Court is involved. This is why everybody who's saying right now this letter doesn't mean anything doesn't understand that sometimes these letters are written and put in the record for future proceedings. Additionally, notwithstanding assuring the United States Supreme Court that late arriving ballots would be fully segregated, the Secretary of State issued conflicting guidance to counties regarding how to manage late arriving ballots. Full segregation, as initially contemplated, was replaced with guidance that encouraged the counties to process ballots but keep totals separated. Also, prior to Election Day and in contravention of state law and a Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruling, some counties began pre-canvassing ballots by reviewing the declarations to find defects, which they sought to then have voters cure. The Secretary of State permitted these actions, which are now subject to several court cases in both federal and state court. Not surprisingly, very serious equal protection rights issues now exist due to the disparate treatment of voters from different counties, i.e., she issued this guidance. Some counties followed it, other counties didn't. They didn't know what to do, disenfranchising voters. Further, poll watchers, which are the hallmark of our Election Day process to promote transparency and fairness, were unlawfully denied the opportunity to meaningfully observe the proceedings of all pre-canvass and canvassing activities. These are a ridiculous montage of issues in Pennsylvania. Finally, and they did that in contravention of a Supreme Court order. They still kept people out. I had video coming in to me from Freedom for the American Republic that I was posting on my Twitter, raw video from them in Pennsylvania. They're down in Pennsylvania right now. They're in Philly. So I know a lot of folks that are down there, and I'm getting a ton of information about stuff that's going on down there. And you know what? To be honest with you, this has not been one of those cases where they're holding things from the public. They're being very transparent about what's going on down there. So, finally, it is my understanding that among all our counties, here we go, an unprecedented 105,000 provisional ballots have been issued. Under our statutes, provisional ballots may only be issued if there is an issue with the voter, i.e. a voter's name doesn't appear in the poll or supplemental poll book, or a voter was issued but did not successfully vote an absentee or mail-in ballot. Clearly, the significant number of provisional ballots are indicative of voter fraud issues, voter issues across the Commonwealth. Governor, all these issues could have been avoided had your Secretary of State and the PA Supreme Court simply followed the law as written. The uncertainty surrounding these interventions has cast an unnecessary cloud on a process, the election, that invites our people to question the results regardless of which candidate or party may prevail. As such, and due directly to these issues and any others that may arise, I am requesting that a full audit be conducted of the 2020 general election prior to the certification of any results. The House of Representatives and Senate previously required a report of the 2020 primary election, which provided meaningful, actionable information regarding the administration of the absentee and mail-in ballot program. In response, we passed a bill, the House passed a bill, which would have provided remedies to nearly all of these issues. However, the legislation was not considered in the Senate because of your opposition to the bill and the veto threat. So, an audit and a verification is being requested. Will they grant it? Goodness knows, but it doesn't matter right now. It doesn't matter, but right now this letter serves as a very important notifier, guys. Who chooses the electors in a state? Who chooses the electors in a state? Someone's got to answer me. The state legislature does. The state legislature chooses electors. This is the Speaker of the House in Pennsylvania. Here we are in, I think this is PA. Yeah, this is Pennsylvania. Here we go. Listen.
At this time, I'm asking Mr. Daniel Sims to allow these 19 people in so that they can assist with the counting, just as the Democrats are in counting. Now, Mr. Sims has said that there are COVID rules that he cannot break, and therefore he's not allowing these people in. If that is the case, let's take 10 or 12 or 15 Democrats out and let 10 or 12 or 15 or 19 Republicans in. These fine people have been on a rooftop in the sun. They are well-behaved, well-groomed, all cooperative and patient. And they merely want their opportunity to help count and watch the counting. And everyone in this country now knows that overnight, 200,000 votes were suddenly appeared in the city of Detroit.
Oh, this is Michigan.
That's a lot of counting. And if there's 19 Democrats down there that are counting, it's only fair that 19, now the number looks to be about 25, should be permitted to go down and count just like the Democrats. So I'm asking you, Mr. Daniel Sims, please allow these Michigan residents to come in at this time. It's now 3:26 p.m. and many of them have been up here 2 hours. I called them. And I asked them to come up. And they took days out of their working schedule. They took a half day, a day to assist with the democracy of this country. That's right. And now they're being told they got to wait on a rooftop because there are COVID rules, and it doesn't make sense. The building is acres and acres. They all have face masks, and if there's 15 or 20 Democrats, then 15 or 20 Republicans should be let in, alternately at least. Exactly. They all have masks on. None of them appears to be sick, and nor have you asked them if they're sick. You could simply ask each one, do you have any COVID symptoms?
And this is why, guys, for years and years, we have been screaming to volunteer in your local area to be a poll watcher. Now they're just kicking them out. I would have charged my ass right through that door. Maybe not. I'd like to talk about it after the fact. But I'm just saying, this is absolutely 100% illegal. And the fact that they're actually doing it shows you everything you need to know. Saying this is illegal is not a conspiracy theory. This guy is on a rooftop screaming at the top of his lungs for equal opportunity to look at these votes. Here we go. Another county in Georgia has reported encountering a glitch, which has caused a delay in the counting of thousands of votes in the 2020 presidential election. And inside that article, election officials estimate that roughly 80,000 absentee ballots were impacted by this glitch, yet decided to push the impacted votes through, knowing some of the votes would likely change. Another county in Georgia, election officials estimate, blah, blah, blah. Dominion voting system, same election software that glitched for Georgia's Spalding and Morgan counties on Tuesday morning, causing machines to crash on election day. Antrim County as well. The glitch in Antrim caused thousands of ballots that were meant for Republican candidates to be wrongly counted for Democrats. Thursday morning, they're adjudicating these 80,000 ballots. Are they going to let Republican poll watchers in to help adjudicate the ballots? Now, let's move quickly. You know what? Hold on a second. Let me go back to Pennsylvania. There's a lot of things happening in Pennsylvania, all of which you guys have just heard in that letter. I detailed the Supreme Court part of it briefly, but I actually want to talk about the Supreme Court a bit more. Hold on. Bear with me a second. Okay, so the Supreme Court originally said that they weren't going to get involved and rule on this until, and then they didn't, the Pennsylvania precincts did not, as per GOP, segregate the ballots that were in question after 8 p.m. on election day. State legislature, state election law disputes the ruling of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is not the legislative branch. They cannot make law. They can only uphold the law that exists. Therefore, a constitutional crisis. Therefore, the Supreme Court of the United States gets involved. Alito wrote a very strongly worded order, which I'm going to have analysis on tomorrow for you, hopefully bringing someone very good on board to do legal analysis for Uncover DC for this stuff. So now Alito says you would better segregate all those ballots. Segregate them. Otherwise, we're going to be in for a problem. You better respond to me by 2 p.m. yesterday. 3 parties responded to that Supreme Court lawsuit. The Secretary of State and the Secretary of State with someone else. And I read them all briefly off the top of my, remembrance. They're disputing that they did anything wrong. They're basically saying that Republicans are conspiracy theorists and they don't know what they're talking about. That's the gist of what the rebuttal to the Supreme Court order is. Not only that, they had a court order to let those people into the building. So let's move over now to, this is really sad. I don't want to interrupt the stream, but I just got word, obviously, that Alec Trebek died, and that's very sad to me, because that's very sad. So just take a minute, and that sucks. So now we have Rudy Giuliani and team in Pennsylvania who are going to be filing lawsuits tomorrow, who yesterday at a press conference had about 3 or 4 witnesses come up to say that they were denied entry to the polling locations, that they were harassed when they were there, and that in the face of a court order, they were not allowed to view the ballots. This has the potential to invalidate all ballots that were counted after the time when these people were not allowed in to observe the counting. That's huge. Don't know how the lawsuit's going to break out. I know they've got a ton. He said 50 to 80 sworn affidavits from witnesses that this had happened. We're going to have to wait and watch what happens with this lawsuit that will be filed tomorrow. I will be covering all of these lawsuits, but in Pennsylvania, we've got Corey Lewandowski working on all of the dead people that have voted. We have the absentee and late ballots being picked up way after the deadline in the law. We have poll watchers being not allowed in. We have this whole Supreme Court brouhaha that's festering right now. Pennsylvania is an absolute mess in terms of the integrity of the election in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania offers 20 electoral votes. The media decided to call the election, which they cannot do, based on Biden winning Pennsylvania by less than 1 percentage point after Donald Trump had been up by nearly 800,000 votes on election night. Yesterday, Rudy Giuliani said that in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a city that is not getting very much attention, the same thing happened. Now, in Arizona, the first, we were doing our election night show, which I have not even gotten to reflect on. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And we had Kelly Ward, chairwoman of the GOP in Arizona, in studio with us that night, right after they called the election for Joe Biden. And she was beside herself that none of the same day votes or late provisionals or late whatever, the votes that came in that day, they were not counted yet. All that had been counted was the early voting. That's a big problem when you're calling an election for a candidate. As soon as they called the Arizona election, everything stopped everywhere else. It was like a bird whistle. So, once that happened, we had a whole breakout of stuff. Everybody started saying, and this was documented very carefully, it's documented in this lawsuit, that people were being instructed on site in Maricopa County to vote with a Sharpie, that their votes were being invalidated by the machines that they had just gotten in there, by the way, and that poll watchers were telling them to hit the green button or hitting it for them to accept those ballots anyway, in contravention of what the procedure is supposed to be, thereby causing all of the Sharpie ballots to be invalidated by the machine. So what this lawsuit that was filed here in Maricopa County in Arizona last night is that when you fill out your ballot with a Sharpie and it bleeds through or causes an overvote, the machine can't read where those bubbles are filled out. It causes an overvote, meaning the machine can't tell whether or not you voted for too many candidates. The machine will kick back a warning. Sometimes it tells you why, sometimes it doesn't. If you hit the X on that machine, you can either be given a new ballot and try again, or it keeps it in a separate drawer in the machine so that after the election is over, when they're going through the results of all those ballots, they can pull them out and they can cure those ballots based on what the intention of the ballot was. When you click the green check mark, it takes those ballots, invalidates the vote, and throws them in with the rest of the ballots. You do not get the segregation. So here, the lawsuit is claiming disenfranchisement, and it's going through all of the allegations here of what happened with detailed affidavits underneath. If a ballot generated and cast at a polling place on election day contains an apparent overvote and the voter chooses not to complete and submit a new ballot, the ballot must be deposited in tray 3 of the electronic tabulator. Once at the counting center, the ballots in tray 3 are assessed by a ballot duplication board comprised of 2 members affiliated with different political parties. If the ballot board can determine the voter's intended choice, it will manually transpose the voter's candidate selections onto a new ballot, which is then duly tabulated. If they can't or disagree in the assessment of the intent, the ballot is forwarded to the snag board for final adjudication. This didn't happen. There are signed affidavits from people who experienced this. There are affidavits from people who were working at the polls at a high level on that day, who witnessed poll workers clicking the green, not explaining to voters what was happening. This lawsuit is very strong. There is witness proof. There's video. They made either an absolutely horrible mistake at the local level there, or, whatever the case may be, there may be thousands and thousands and thousands of cast votes for either candidate in Sharpie that are completely invalidated because of what these poll workers did. Now, Maricopa County leans very heavily Republican, but I'm going to say this, and I think that 99.99% of you guys would be on the same side as me. If there was a way for us to know 100% certainty who won this election, if there was no question about it, there were no allegations of fraud, it was a real election with integrity, and for some reason Joe Biden won, we would be okay with it. We'd be upset, we'd be demoralized, we'd be hurt, but we would know that people voted for Joe Biden and he won. This is not happening in this case. It's not. We cannot accept these results because there are too many instances, which we've just spent the past, almost hour going through, in too many key swing states for it to be a coincidence. Now, I haven't even gotten into the statistical improbabilities of all of this, how it's statistically almost impossible for several 100,000 people to have voted for one candidate and none for the other. Or it's statistically improbable for there to be 100,000 more votes for president than for the down ballot candidates. Or how it's statistically improbable for a certain number of votes to flood in all at one time for one candidate when nobody is counting. It's after election time and all of a sudden 150,000 votes come in. Given all of this, 75 million people in the United States are saying to themselves right now, this is not an election that I can trust. It is a constitutional crisis.